The Gospel of Matthew. To judge or not to judge. Matthew 7, 1-6. Introduction. 1. A favorite saying of many people is judge not, that you be not judged. A. Frequently quoted whenever someone is pointing out the sins or faults of another. B. The impression is that we should never make moral judgments in what we see in others. 2. Is that true? Is that what Jesus meant when he said this? A. Are we never to make moral judgments about the right or wrong in other? B. If we see wrong in others, can we never point it out? 3. I am persuaded that Jesus' statement is often misused, that Jesus taught A. There are times when we must judge. B. There are times when it is appropriate to point out the faults in others. Don't judge, so that you won't be judged. For with whatever judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with whatever measure you measure, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but don't consider the beam that is in your own eye? Matthew 7, 1-3. Or how will you tell your brother, let me remove the speck from your eye, and behold, the beam is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First remove the beam out of your own eye, and then you can see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye. Don't give that which is holy to the dogs, neither throw your pearls before the pigs, lest perhaps they trample them under their feet, and turn and tear you to pieces. Matthew 7, 4-6. 1. His words often used to forbid all manner of judgment. A. Such as adverse or unfavorable criticism. 1. Like pointing out a fault in someone else. 2. Even if it be truly constructive criticism. B. Such as the exercise of church discipline. 1. Exercising discipline of any sort does require judging others as to their moral or spiritual condition. 2. Since such judgment is involved, some feel verses 1-2 rule out any sort of church discipline. C. Such as exposing those who teach error. 1. Admittedly, it requires making a judgment in order to consider whether someone is teaching error. 2. Therefore, some people, in light of verses 1-2, believe we cannot speak out against those who teach error. 2. Jesus did not rule out all forms of judgment. A. Note the immediate context. 1. Which reveals that in some cases proper judgment must be made. 2. Matthew 7, 6. Implies judgment is to be made as to who are dogs and who are hogs. A. Otherwise, how can we know when not to give that which is holy to dogs? B. Or how can we know when not to cast our pearls before swine? 3. Matthew 7:15-20 implies that we must make judgments in determining who is a false teacher. By their fruits you will know them. B. Consider the remote context. 1. Which speak of times when judgment must be made. 2. Elsewhere, Jesus taught people to judge with righteous judgment. John 7:24. 2. Christians have a responsibility to judge those who are inside the local church. 1 Corinthians 5, 9-13. 3. We are taught by the apostle of love, John, to test the spirits, which requires making judgments. 1 John 4, 1, 3. Jesus defined what kind of judging he is condemning. A. Judging when one is blind to his or her own faults. 1. Read carefully. Matthew 7, 3-5. 2. Jesus is saying that is it wrong for anyone to concentrate his attention on the speck in his brother's eye, and while thus occupied, to ignore the beam in his own eye. Hendrickson. 3. Just Paul taught the necessity of proper introspection when helping others. Galatians 6, 1, B. Judging without mercy and love. 1. The Lord is here condemning the spirit of censoriousness, judging harshly, self-righteously, without mercy, without love, as also the parallel passage, Luke 6:36-37, clearly indicates. Hendrickson. 2. James warned against making judgments without mercy. James 2:13. A. If we make judgments without showing mercy, then no mercy will be shown when we are judged. B. Just as Jesus said in verse 2, 1. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. 2. With the same measure you use, it will be measured back to you. 4. Jesus implies there are times when we must make judgments. A. It is after we have corrected our own faults. 1. First, we must remove the beam from our own eye. Matthew 7:5. 2. When we have done so, we are able to see, discern, judge, and be of help to others who are overtaken in their faults. 3. Indeed, the law of Christ requires us to. Galatians 6:1-2. B. Again, we must judge between those worthy and those who are holy and dogs. 1. Note carefully Jesus' words in Matthew 7:6. A. Some are not worthy of that which holy. B. Some are like dogs and swine. Determining who is which requires judgment upon our part. 2. With those who are receptive, we are to be long-suffering in trying to help them come out of their error. 2 Timothy 2:24-26. 3. But for those who are not, we are not to waste what is good and holy on them. A. The instructions of Jesus to his disciples. Matthew 10:12-15. B. Cf. The example of Paul and Barnabas at Antioch of Pisidia. Acts 13:42-46. Conclusion. 1. The kind of judging forbidden by Jesus is that which Linsky calls self-righteous, hypocritical judging, which is false and calls down God's judgment on itself. 2. This is the kind of judging that was also condemned by James when he wrote, Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother, speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law but a judge. There is one lawgiver, who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? James 4:11-12. 3. May God help us to refrain from such judging. A. To be more apt to remove the beams from our own eyes. B. To then be more useful in helping others with their problems, but to say we should never judge is to abuse what Jesus teaches, not only in this passage but elsewhere as well. Speaking of judging, are you preparing yourself for the day in which you will be judged by the Lord? John 12:48. 2 Corinthians 5:10. The end. The Gospel of Matthew. To judge or not to judge. Matthew 7:1-6.